Do you remember when you were a kid and people were saying that you were the future? It's been said over and over and in many different ways, because for reasons that we are able to see clearly now, the world in that moment seemed like it could be better. Today, those kids are all grown up. We are the future and we are reimagining a better world. In the face of everything going on across the planet, we still love, hope, create, and have fun, because these are all the things we want for the future. But why wait until tomorrow? The future is now. We're here on the Reimagine Spokane podcast called The Future is Now with Sarah Dixit, my APIC Spokane co-chair, my ACL Spokane board president, my coolest friend in Spokane, my most famous organizer here in Spokane, Spokane's most wanted. Tell us a little bit about you, or tell us a little bit about your work here. Why are you so famous? Why are you so cool?
I think that was overly generous, but thank you. So I hold a lot of different hats here in Spokane, two of which are co-chair and board president for APIC and ACL, respectively. And the other big job that I have is that I'm the organizing director for Pro-Choice Washington. We're a independent reproductive freedom organization that primarily focuses on advocacy and policy and electoral stuff. And in the past, I worked at Planned Parenthood. I graduated from Whitworth. So
go Pirates.
Yeah, we are the Pirates. In August, it'll be 10 years of me living here, which makes me feel very old.
But you're not.
But I'm not. For some people. For others, I'm like, wow, millennial. And I also get to chair the equity subcommittee for the city. And that has been a good opportunity to kind of get a look behind the curtain of what's going on with different city ordinances and how we spend our money and how equity isn't often involved with those decisions. So trying to make sure that our city council members know and city administration know how to implement equity in every aspect of their job and not just things that explicitly say, like, this is for diversity. I think there's just so many opportunities to get involved because here in Spokane, there's so many different things going on. So I kind of just jump into everything I can, but also learning how to say no so that I can preserve some of my self.
Yeah, set those boundaries.
We're learning. 28, here we are.
Let's go. All right, it took 28 years for you to get here. How did you get into this work?
That's a great question. So I grew up in Southern California, like you did. But that is a spoiler for next episode.
Wow, thanks.
I'm so sorry. So I grew up in Pasadena, which is in the LA area. And my family is an immigrant family. So my parents immigrated from India. We had a lot of family also immigrate in like the 80s-ish. So it was cool growing up around a lot of family. And it was also challenging to be growing up in an environment where you're both like very Indian and also not Indian enough, or you're very American or not American enough. So you're kind of like straddling I think it's been coined as like bicultural experience where they're just very, very different. So I think that is where I started to learn how to use my voice, because some things didn't sit well with me. Other things I felt could be changed or altered. So I think as a child and as a teenager, when I was doing my rebellious phase, I really got to figure out what my voice was, how to use it, when to use it. And then I used that in college when I studied sociology. I first came in as pre-med, as all cutie Asians do.
Yeah.
And I just hated it. So I changed my major to sociology because it was the thing that made me really passionate and excited. And I think that was the opportunity that I needed to really see how the systems in the U.S. are really impacting people disproportionately. And so in that experience, I got to become a campus organizer, and I fought to get a reproductive rights club on campus, which was hard to do because Whitworth was not the biggest fan of that perspective.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to, contact media, do petitions, contact alumni, do all the things that I need to do. And so we were able to get the club officially chartered a month before I graduated. So I think that gave me like the specific focus on reproductive rights. And I think it's something that is deeply connected to all the other issues, just because how people choose to have kids, not have kids, be able to raise the kids that they have, all hinges upon all the other issues. So I think it was a really good step for me to kind of experience all the different movements that are going on simultaneously instead of like completely siloing into one component. So that's kind of how I got my start.
Wow.
Yeesh. And then with APIC, I was at a city council meeting, and Rowena and Puyan saw me, and they're like, young Asian girl.
Got one.
So they invited me over. I think we met at Rowena's apartment, condo. I don't know how to describe it. And I was like, oh, like this was a piece of Spokane that was missing for me.
Which part?
Seeing people who look like me. I think at Whitworth, I was one of a couple South Asian people. So really having to identify how to bring my culture into the things that I was doing and not feel like I had to assimilate. I think that's part of the privilege of being a second generation immigrant, is that I can choose how and when to assimilate, whereas I feel like my parents didn't really have that choice. So yeah, I think I didn't know if I was going to stay in Spokane after Whitworth, even during Whitworth. But once I found APIC and found a community of people who were pushing for change, I saw myself staying here for a longer term. And here we are.
Glad you're still here.
Oh, thank you.
We couldn't have done this without you. I wouldn't be here without you either. I'm not about to be co-chair or chair by myself.
You're doing a lot.
So are you. And like you were saying, so many hats and so many different facets of our community. And that, I mean, it goes without saying for us that we understand it's political. And I just want to know what it means for you to be political or civically engaged.
Good question. I think politics for a lot of people is a controversial or a dirty word or whatever. People really avoid it at all costs. I mean, people always say like no politics or whatever talk at the dinner table. But then you couldn't really talk about anything because politics is involved with everything, at least in my opinion. And for people who don't really see that, I think having more conversations with people who might live different lives or look differently than them might garner a different perspective. But I think for me, it's extremely important to remain civically engaged, be mindful of how politics impact our day-to-day. Like this morning, I rode my bike up to Perry, and you think about the infrastructure that allows you to do that without being on roads with cars. So being able to access the trail or the walking bridge over the train tracks on Sherman or other things like that, that's all politics, right? It takes people who are interested in the environment, interested in multimodal ways of getting around, all those things to be able to have something that might seem trivial to some folks who don't use bikes or other forms of transportation, but for those who do and who really rely on it, it's a big game changer. So I think if people even think about like what their job is or how they get to and from school or to and from work, where their school is located, how they're able to get food on the table, like if rent is too high or whatever, like all of that is political. So I think it's really just taking the time to think about it a little bit more and see how different elected officials or the people around them either support the perspective that they have or are actively against it, and then learning what to do about it.
Yeah. Thanks for being one of those cyclists. I hope you wear a helmet.
I do wear a helmet
Good. You
because
got one
a
of those
certain
fast.
someone,
Who, me?
yeah,
Who, me? What happened?
Ryan got hit by a car on their bike.
It was the car's fault.
It was the car's fault, but Ryan was wearing their helmet.
I was wearing a helmet. I'll always wear a helmet.
Good.
No matter what.
PSA for helmets.
I wore a helmet even when I was testing my setup around my parking lot, just in case, dude.
No, yeah, we are all here.
Well, I was
for
going to go on
safety.
a ride after, so it's also, I was just being prepared.
Love
But
it. Stay prepared.
so you work for pro-choice and doing reproductive rights, and you said it was policy and advocacy. Why are you here? Why is this organization here? Why is your organization needed?
Great question. I think for reproductive rights and reproductive health, there's a lot of different words, right? There's reproductive health, rights, freedom, justice, probably like parity, equity, all these other words to describe all these different issues. But really, all the organizations that are working for that type of movement are all part of an ecosystem, is how I think about it. So it's not like we just need one large organization to be focused on this issue and really be the like face and name of it all, but having smaller organizations that can do the grassroots work, who can be really deeply involved with down ballot races. So things like school board races or county commissioner, city council, like all of those aren't necessarily ones that a lot of people talk about, but they have tremendous impact on people's ability to have kids or not have kids.
Because most people are talking about just the president.
Yeah, people just talk about the president or the Supreme Court, which are very important. But when we have a situation where like Trump was in office in 2016, throughout that time, he really tried to make it so that abortion was functionally not legal, right? By like putting in different justices to make sure they would overturn Roe v. Wade, not really pursuing when different states put forth bans or different trap laws. And so it's really important because then our governor and our attorney general, Jay Inslee and Bob Ferguson, could push back. And if we didn't have them at that level of governor or attorney general, we would have been screwed. So it's really paying attention to the different ways the checks and balances can work, because oftentimes it doesn't feel like they're working at the national level. But I think in our state and local governments, it has more of an ability to actually do something.
For us locally.
For us locally, yeah.
And for people potentially coming across state lines to seek safety and the health services that they need.
Yeah, it's really becoming state v. state now. So everything we can do to make Washington a champion on all these issues, the better, because we never know how creative the next ban will be or the next like criminal code or whatever that they want to add. And they are weirdly creative with that stuff. So needing to figure out ways to
like
protect.
What?
I mean, the big one that happened last legislative session or maybe earlier this year was an abortion trafficking bill that Idaho passed. And essentially, it dictated that minors couldn't seek help from other trusted adults to get across state lines to get mifepristone, misoprostol, get an abortion in clinic. And if a trusted adult did that, it would be seen as them trafficking the teen if there was not explicit permission from a guardian or parent. And so, very creative, right?
Yeah, and you got to think like in Idaho, potentially this minor is not wanting to address their parents because
Yeah, it could be a safety issue. It could be an abuse issue. It could be, differences in opinion of bodily autonomy. So many different reasons. Or it could just be awkward for them and they don't want to talk to their parents about sex. Like, it can be as simple as that. And so choosing to criminalize a trusted adult who wants to help a young person in their life get the healthcare that they need and they're wanting really just further isolates that young person and puts them in a more dangerous situation. So things like that, right?
Yeah.
Very creative. Not something I ever thought I would be saying out loud, abortion trafficking. Yet here we are. So it's a lot of different things happening. So it's important to be paying attention, but also not to like doom scroll and overwhelm yourself because there's always something. So it's important to kind of provide a balance of all the bad stuff you're kind of consuming and then being able to take action. I think that's the way I've been able to not just curl up in a little ball and hide in the corner. But that helps too.
So can you talk a little bit more about what reproductive health looks like or what it entails? Because I think there might be some perception that it's only abortion.
Yes. So yeah, abortion is a huge part of it. And also birth control, sex education that is inclusive and comprehensive and evidence-based. Things like having annual checkups. So making sure if you're someone with a uterus, having pap smears because people are actually getting impacted by cancer younger and younger. The data is showing, which is scary.
Yeah, that is scary.
Yeah. So like wanting to stay on top of that, making sure people know about STIs, how they're transmitted, how they can treat them. I think there's been this rhetoric since like we were kids for sure around like, are you clean or not? And like clean being then if someone does have an STI, then it's like dirty, right? So really trying to destigmatize testing so that people feel comfortable about it. And it's just like a routine checkup, not something that's like extra salacious or anything.
Yeah.
So all of that is included. Also being able to like house and feed your kids, because if you can't afford to have 3 meals a day for your child, like that is a reproductive rights issue. And so many other things, right? Being able to, like if we're thinking about Black maternal health, being able to advocate for your care to your provider, having them believe you with your symptoms and with your pain, being able to get quality care is a big reproductive rights issue. So many things. And abortion is a big part of it because we know that if abortion is banned, it doesn't help like maternal mortality rates or help people be able to make decisions about their families. And there's actually been a lot of conversation around people not wanting to try to have kids in states that are anti-abortion because they're scared of losing their own life due to complications. So many things. But yeah, I think it's an important issue that really touches on all the different topics. And it's been a good opportunity to just learn a lot.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on this next question that I have about like what is at stake, and you touched on just health in general. That's a huge thing. Like why wouldn't we want to be healthy people? But then it's like potentially being arrested for helping someone or just providing sex positive education. Like, it sounds like there's so many anti-trans, like bodily autonomy, anti-women, just anti-everything. And so I don't want to say it's just in the election, but it's going to have a lot of implications on what's going forward. But I guess for this election, are there any other things that you feel like would be at stake if people don't vote for bodily autonomy or with their values? And hopefully people listening have progressive and, that value people on the planet.
Yeah. So I'd say what's at stake is everything. I mean, like, if we're thinking about our democracy, I'd say that is a big thing.
Is that even a thing right now?
I mean, I think it can certainly be improved, but it can definitely get worse. So I would say no matter what issue you care about, it definitely is impacted by the 2024 election and every election beyond. Something that we say a lot is our rights are only as good as the last election. And unfortunately in the US, that is very true. Because each election, like, we still have judges in federal courts that were appointed by Reagan. I want to say we still have some.
Really?
Years. And so, like, that is a long impact.
That was a long time ago.
Of one election, right? So we will have, unless they do term limits or impeach Supreme Court justices, like, we'll have Trump appointed judges for a long time because Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch are all young, like, in comparison to other folks on the bench. So they can have impact for the next 40 years, which is a long time. We'll be senior citizens by then. So
yeah,
that's
I was like, I have to do the math. How old am I? Oh, I'm not 21 anymore.
No, start to panic. So yeah, I think people forget the long game, and I think it's something that Christian nationalism and conservatives and Republicans are very good at, is the long game. And we have to play some catch up. And I think we need to remember that it is our job as people who care about our community and our planet to make sure we're voting in every election, because some people can't, right? People who are convicted of felonies, people who have been incarcerated, people who are immigrants, people who are undocumented, all these communities who contribute to, taxes and all those things and to our community, don't have a say.
Too.
They don't have a say.
Yeah.
So there's just so much. And so if you're someone who cares about your neighbor, I think this is a great way to show that you care, is by voting in their best interest and not just paying attention to the individual, but the collective.
Yeah, so you're just talking about how people need to think more collectively. And I feel like that's something that's totally different than the American dream narrative, where it's like your own house, your own yard, your own, like, everything for some reason ended up being very individual. And I feel like there's a lot of things happening in Spokane and around the world. But when we think of Spokane, where have you already seen some of these changes happening?
Yeah, I think when it comes to looking at the wins, I think that's really important, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. That's another classic. So we can't just be, like, focused on our final destination, which would be what? Like, everybody is happy and healthy and has all their needs met and are able to get healthcare anywhere and not have to pay for it.
At no cost.
Yeah, at no cost, and be able to take their bike or a cool train there. There's no cars, like, that would take a very long time. So in the meantime, until we get there, it's celebrating those stops along the way that are times of celebration and us at least taking a breath together. So some of those this past few years have been things passed at the state legislature, things like, comprehensive sex ed, making sure that all Washington students are receiving quality comprehensive sex education, K through 12, because we know that sex ed isn't just a one-time learning that kids have to go through, but being able to have building blocks of how they approach one another, how they approach themselves, and how they approach like the world around them. So that has been really cool to see, making sure that we are passing protections for providers, because we know that a lot of the bills criminalizing abortion care are criminalizing doctors and providers specifically. So here in Washington, making sure that if a provider is providing the health care to a patient from Idaho, that Idaho can't sue that doctor.
Yeah.
Or
that makes total sense.
Criminalize them. Yeah. So being able to be like, oh, you're doing your job. How about we make sure you don't get in jail for doing your job? So I think things like that. I mean, even with here in Spokane, little things like the Post Street Bridge finally being open. So nice. And being able to have that be mostly a method of like pedestrian or bike travel, and has one way with cars, but they have to slow down considerably. I'd say that's a win for creating more space for a non-car world, or even the city line, or during the expo season, having STA lower costs. So it was like 50 cents or something on weekends. Just little things that we keep chipping away at and seeing what we can do with. And another big one for city council was the increased notice for renters if their rent is increasing. And that was fought pretty hard by landlords and by different like developers. But just giving people more of a heads up allows them to figure out if they can continue to live where they're living or find other accommodations instead of just kicking people out.
Yeah.
So I think...
especially with homelessness being criminalized now.
Yes. Yeah. So like now, Spokane will be enforcing Prop 1. They hadn't been. And now with the Supreme Court case, they will be. So it's just creating more and more creative solutions for issues that are just like lawyers and politicians and judges criminalizing people from being people. But we care about people, so we will try our best to, work around the different things and care for one another in a way that is impactful. And even if we can't like go all the way to Supreme Court and be like, you should change this decision, in Spokane, we can pass ordinances that allow people maybe like a strike system, or maybe a different thing than just throwing them in jail, or like figuring out different ways to, I think, making sure that we're not just like putting Band-Aids on problems or exacerbating problems, but actually finding solutions. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to be excited about that we've passed and that we have continued to work on. So if anybody needs a little dopamine boost, let me know. We can talk about it.
Awesome. So our next question is about healing. And I think that's generally where a lot of people I know in the community are really interested in taking that path. And it's not just healing in themselves, but it's also healing the systems that we live in that are continuously damaging us. And we know that's the long game and it might take time. But as far as what you do individually, what does healing look like for you?
Good question. I think healing is one of those things that morphs, I feel, as I get older. I think consistently, though, it's been therapy. We love therapy.
We do love therapy.
But caveat is that it's not just like therapy with anyone, right? Because, sometimes the therapist that you have might not be great. But finding a therapist who aligns with you and who has maybe shared identities with you, so that when you're interacting with them, it's less of like you having to explain things to them or less of you having to like perform, and showing up as authentically as possible is really where I've seen my therapy work out and be really great. And for those of us who aren't white or aren't straight or cis or aren't Christian, there's not a ton of options here in Spokane. So being willing to do telehealth and other things like that. So my provider's on the west side. But because of technology, we're able to meet once a week, and it's been really good for my healing. I think being in nature also helps. We have a gorgeous river running through town. We have so many parks. So I think just like taking time to slow down and unplug has been really nice for me.
Yeah, I noticed that your notifications are silenced. It tells me.
Yeah,
No, I didn't know.
always.
I'm like, Sarah's disconnecting. This is great.
I do it. I'm in work mode from like 9 to 4:30, so it doesn't notify me of anything, which is nice because then I can focus more. But yeah, so different things like that has helped me heal. I think having conversations like this and being able to like commiserate with people who have shared experience or shared dreams about what we want for the future is also a healing practice. I don't know, drinking cold water is healing, especially when it's hot outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different things, but also community is a big one. Very lucky to have a very caring support system and community here and virtually for people who live elsewhere. And that is always like what I come back to, because even if you don't feel like you have the strength to continue on with a certain fight, you can lean on others to kind of carry it with you. Because it's far too much to carry it on your own.
Yeah, we need to be doing this together too.
Yes. Especially because, you know, if you're one person, you probably have biases and different things that you're not paying attention to. So the more inclusive your coalition is or your community is, the more you're paying attention to like different ways things can impact different communities. So yeah.
And along the lines of community, what does community healing look like to you?
I would say a lot of the different things that I said for myself. I think community healing is also like being able to share a meal together, or like carpool, or like go on commute on a bike ride together, like things that are typically seen as solitary activities or things you're just supposed to check off on your to-do list or our expectations of what you do in your day, but making it a moment to connect with someone or create that kind of joy in the mundane, I'd say. And community healing can look like everybody just like laying on the floor, taking a nap, crying together, all the things of just like, I think figuring out how to express our emotions in a way that's authentic and not just like pretend everything's okay and do the Spokane nice or like the polite thing, but to show up the way that you're feeling, I think can be healing for community.
Yeah. Community nap sounds great.
Community
if we could
nap.
all just do that at the same time. And
yes, community nap followed by community ice cream.
yeah.
That's my
Here,
ideal.
let's get that on the ballot.
Okay.
And you're talking a little bit about joy. That's also your middle name. And
It
I feel
is.
like you bring so much joy and happiness to people's lives, including mine.
You sound like my mom.
Aw, you're welcome. I'm just kidding. Well, how do you celebrate and bring joy into your life? As we know, the systems, again, are always just trying to make us work, feel like we're disposable, feel like we're not worth anything, and that we as ACL in the past have had a theme for Heritage Month that is, well, it was Rest is Resistance, but I also...
Healing is resistance?
Healing is resistance. I guess that was a healing thing.
Yeah.
But healing is also joy. Anyway, how do you what are some of the ways that you celebrate and defy the system and, just be yourself?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the nonprofit industrial complex is a real thing, which I'm sure we can have multiple episodes on. I think for me, it's not approaching it in a way that's like rooted in the ideals of like the white supremacy norms that a lot of nonprofits have. But I think putting the people of the organization first and the community first can really be where I find more joy in the work. And yeah, I send that email with multiple exclamation marks or say ha ha in a text to a legislator, like just different things that is less of me having to like fully code switch into like professional mode versus non-professional mode. Because I think professionalism is subjective, and often if people are making the rules about it, it's also very white centered. So I think I just like do it, and I don't try to like be boring and professional, but be more like, yeah, this is like me as Sarah, even though I'm an organizing director, like interacting with this, candidate for the gubernatorial race or whatever. Being able to just be me, because then I think it's less like draining. Because then if I have to act a different way, then I'm much more like aware of my movements and much more self-conscious and anxious versus just like kind of being myself, is how I bring joy into the work. And also being creative about what the work looks like. So like for us preparing for the election in the fall, doing like primaries in the park or doing voting trivia or doing the voting event at the Chameleon in October. Like those are all ways of doing the work, but involving joy and celebration in it. Because not everything has to be like super pedantic and boring. Things can be fun. So like doing a canvas.
Nothing should be pedantic and boring.
I know. Like we last year did a canvas for current council member Paul Dillon at the Scoop. And after people got back from doing their canvassing, they got free ice cream, which was really sweet. So things like that just make it more fun and allow people to congregate and have conversations after. So it's not just like, give us your labor, we'll give you a scoop of ice cream, but stick around, talk, mingle, build new friendships.
Community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like so often it's not that. It's much more focused on like, what can you give us or what can you provide?
Yeah. So like very transactional. Yeah. Well, we like that community building aspect and we like the fun, and I feel like everything we're trying to do is as fun as possible. And someone keeps telling me not everything's going to be fun, but I'm like, let's try and find a way.
Let's find a way. You just, put little, don't people do it where like if you're doing a boring activity, you get a treat every so often to like keep yourself excited about it?
I don't know. I haven't.
We'll try it.
Okay. So this is one of the last questions. What do you reimagine for Spokane?
I reimagine for Spokane. Well, selfishly, I want to hide it because I think Spokane is great in the current size it has, and I don't want to.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But we know, places are supposed to grow or whatever. So
are they?
I mean,
do they
I don't
have
know.
to?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't make the rules.
They don't need. We don't need to be selling Spokane to people that don't live here and need a vacation home. There's people here that need our own housing.
It's true. So if we are advertising Spokane, if we're reimagining Spokane, and we depict ourselves as this wonderful city that has opportunity and has nature and has education and all these things, affordable housing, like all the things that we would want to have, I think we have components of. It's mostly how do we invest in a way that is centering the community versus centering the pockets of developers or the pockets of other people who are wanting to take advantage of the coolness of our city. And I think to reimagine Spokane would be one where people aren't like, ew, Spokane sucks. Or like, oh, I don't know how you can live there or things like that. Even though like secretly I'm like, I will argue with any of you any day. And I like having the secret of Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
I think people realizing the work that we're doing and how radical it actually is. Like before Seattle, we did the like multi-family zoning and like removing it from the single family household and doing things like that. So I think just being able to be creative would be how I would reimagine it, and not just approach things in the way that other cities have done simply because it's familiar, but being, I think, more radical with our approach. And I think we can get there, but it's going to require some like trust and time.
Do you say trust?
Mm-hmm.
Trust in who?
Exactly. Yeah, you've got to trust each other. You got to trust that council knows what they're doing, the city administration, blah, blah, blah. But it's hard when transparency is a big issue. People don't have the privilege of time and of knowledge around how our like civic system works. It's intentionally confusing. Even for me and you, like we're involved pretty heavily. And even that, I'm like, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, it's really hard to read.
It's a lot.
To read laws and to read just everything in the way they describe jobs in government is still very confusing.
Yeah. So I think a lot of trust is needed, and figuring out ways to, I think, make things in an accessible way so that people can understand how to make an impact, where their money is going, how change can happen, so that we have more involvement of community members, not just like people who are already there and who kind of get insular. Yeah, and have the luxury of being in the room.
So how can your everyday person who's not involved get involved?
They can come get coffee with me. Love doing that. They can go to a city council meeting. We are recording this on a Monday. Oop, hurt my watch. And Monday is when city council meets. So someone could go sit and see how that feels, if that feels like the best way to be engaged. They can read different news articles of the different issues happening, recommend Range because they do quite a robust overview of the different things happening in our city. I think just like finding whatever you're passionate about is a good place to start, because there often is something that you can get involved with here locally based on what that is. So if someone's super invested in bikes, there's totally a place for them to get involved and be an activist in that. If people are really invested in books and libraries, there's certainly an avenue for that, especially with the amount of books that are being banned nationwide. So there's truly a place for everyone. And it can seem really daunting because of everything. But I think just realizing that like every step is important because it's a step towards progress, and not just giving up because it feels too much.
Yeah, take it in small chunks. Take a break. This movement is going to be a long one. There's going to be so much fighting and pushing back and pushing the boulder uphill that everyone else is doing, and we just need everyone to chip in.
Yeah.
At some point.
Exactly.
And at least vote.
At the very least, vote. I mean, voting, I'd say, is the bare minimum. If you are someone who's eligible to vote, that is an easy way to take action, but should not be where your engagement stops. Because then, depending upon who you vote for and if they get elected, you got to hold them accountable and make sure that they do the things that you voted for them to do. And people forget that second part. And the second part is arguably more important than the first.
Yeah. How can we hold electeds accountable?
Yeah. So for example, let's say we elected you, We
Yeah.
elected Ryann Louie to city council. And you promised on the campaign trail to make free ice cream Fridays,
Yeah.
right? That was your
That's my campaign.
whole platform.
Mm-hmm.
You got everyone across the aisle. It's a very, what is it? Non-controversial issue. It would help local businesses because then the city would provide that funding for the small businesses that own the ice cream shops, whatever. So you get elected, and we are in 6 months to your term, and we don't have free ice cream Fridays.
Dropping the ball.
So you want to bug Ryann as much as possible, emailing, setting up meetings, dropping by during a council meeting, contacting your LA, like to be like, hello, I want my ice cream. Remember you promised, and just badgering you. So just remember like what people promised and what they said their values were. See who endorsed them, because then they should be a proponent of that issue. So if like we as Pro-Choice Washington endorsed a candidate, we want to make sure that they are paying attention to how abortion rights are impacted at the city level and can talk about those issues, and that they'll vote and be creative with different legislation they can pass to further that protection here.
So the elected would basically just need to know that there's other people that care about this issue. And it's not just the activists that show up to every council meeting, and that it sounds like everyone's voice actually does make an impact.
Especially because like if you think your voice doesn't matter and you don't use it, then it certainly won't, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you try and then it ends up, actually making an impact, then it's there and change is happening. And sometimes like legislators will receive a lot of emails about something, even though it is a popular thing, but people don't think that they need to send in support because it's a no-brainer. But I think it's like approaching, if it's something that you're passionate about, just letting them know like, hey, thanks for passing this like renter protection, or thanks for passing this policy that allows us to have free bus fares for folks 19 and younger, or like whatever. I think giving them their flowers too when they like go tooth and nail to fight for stuff in the budget or get something passed, because then it reminds them that like they are doing the work that our communities want them to do, and we see that. Like when you do a good job, you want to know that you did a good job, and I think people in office are the same way, if not more so.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. They're people too.
Allegedly, yes. Just kidding.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is our last question. How can people find out more about your organization?
Great question. They could check out our website, which is prochoicewashington.org. They could find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, I want to say. We have all three. Same thing, Pro-Choice Washington. They can find me around town often because I'm everywhere. Just short little Indian girl running around. And yeah, I would say those would be the primary sources.
Okay. Yeah, you offered to take people to coffee. I'm like, how do people get coffee with you? But we won't post your phone number down here on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, we won't do that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom and experience, and just for powering through and just showing up where you're needed and wanted, and for just being you. Like, I just appreciate your friendship and your support so much, and I'm glad that we both found our way from California to be here together in Spokane.
So sweet. Thank you so much. It was an honor to be on the podcast. And I think spaces like this are really important because it reminds people that they're not alone if they're wanting to create change here in Spokane or elsewhere, that there are people like them who want to see something different. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, Reimagining Spokane. On Saturday, October 19th from 12 to 9 p.m. at the Chameleon, come out to vote at our free ballot party, Better World, Better Vote. Agents for Collective Liberation and partners are bringing the party to politics and civic engagement because we can't imagine changing the world without having a little fun. Thank you so much to our sponsor, Empire Health Community Action Fund, our producer, Fohrm Studio, our music producers, Ryann and Kyle, and to our listeners and voters for helping to create a future that we can have now. Thank you for listening to The Future Is Now. Currently, Reimagine Spokane is a program of Agents for Collective Liberation in Spokane. It was the brainchild of Executive Director Ryann Louie as the feeling and energy that we intend to belong and be accessible to everyone so that they can join us and others in creating a new Spokane. For more info, check out our website at reimaginespokane.us and find us on social media at Reimagine Spokane. Better World, Better Vote is just around the corner, and we would love to see you there. Beep.